Imagine getting a critical alert at 2 in the morning.
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. By the time your on-call analyst, wipes their eyes, logs in, and starts triaging the logs at maybe 2.15, your entire network is just gone.
Yeah, completely compromised.
In cybersecurity, we used to measure our response time in weeks, right? A vulnerability drops, a vendor issues an advisory, and your IT team had this, stressful but predictable 14 to 30-day window to test and deploy a patch.
That was the old world.
Exactly. Today, we are operating on a stopwatch. Welcome to the deep dive. For this specific intelligence briefing, we are activating a specialized framework tailored just for you. We call it C.I.P.H.E.R. That's the Central Intelligence Platform for Heightened Emergent Resilience for Southeast Europe. Decode the threat, defend the region.
And that stopwatch reality you just mentioned, that's exactly what we need to confront today. We're tracking this fundamental shift in the temporal mechanics of cyber attacks.
The speed.
Right, the speed.
Yeah.
The gap between a vulnerability being discovered and a network being fully compromised has practically vanished.
And because this framework is built specifically for your operations across Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, North Macedonia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Moldova, I want to establish our baseline right up front.
Transparency is key here.
Exactly. We look at the telemetry for this region constantly. And I want to be clear, there are no confirmed cyber incidents this week specifically in Bulgaria, Serbia, North Macedonia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, or Moldova.
Right. We aren't going to invent a local crisis just to get your attention.
No, definitely not. Though it is worth noting that on August 18th, Greece placed 24th globally on the National Cybersecurity Index, which, that's a solid benchmark for regional maturity.
It is a strong benchmark, yeah. But that regional maturity is about to be stress tested by global forces.
Oh, for sure.
The fact that your specific nation might not be in the headlines this week is really just a temporary reprieve. The architecture you rely on, like your Microsoft cloud environments, your AI development pipelines, your open source servers, they are currently under massive sustained fire globally.
And the operational lessons from those global campaigns are urgent. The second-order effects will absolutely reach your network.
Without a doubt.
Which is why we need to focus on the sheer velocity of these threats. And let's start with the updated joint advisory from CISA, the FBI, and the Department of Health and Human Services. This is regarding the Medusa ransomware operation.
Yeah, that dropped on August 18th.
Right. And it paints a pretty grim picture for critical infrastructure. We're looking at over 500 organizations breached globally since June 2021.
It's massive.
Healthcare, defense industrial bases, critical manufacturing. But knowing how ransomware as a service works, where, an initial access broker sells a compromised VPN credential to a Medusa affiliate, the scale isn't even the most shocking part to me.
No, it's the timeline.
Yes, the timeline. It's almost like a fast food franchise model. Medusa provides the branding and the software, and the local affiliates just execute these rapid smash-and-grab operations.
That's a great way to look at it. We're so conditioned to think of advanced persistent threats as, lurking in a network for months.
Right. Quietly mapping Active Directory, moving laterally.
Finding the backups, yeah. But the Medusa affiliates have totally abandoned that playbook. The advisory details that the time between initial access and full data exfiltration is now routinely measured in hours.
Not days, hours. Let's break down what that actually means for your SOC team. Say you're managing a power grid in Romania or a healthcare facility in Greece. You probably rely on automated perimeter defense and human alert triaging.
Which is standard.
Right. But if an access broker hands off a compromised remote desktop protocol session to a Medusa affiliate at midnight, and they start exfiltrating terabytes of patient data by 3:00 a.m., traditional human triaging is fundamentally obsolete.
Obsolete and honestly dangerous. Because if your endpoint detection platform fires off a medium-severity alert, say, because of an anomalous PowerShell script execution, and your security analyst decides to look at it first thing in the morning,
it's game over.
Exactly. The extortion is already complete. The data is staged on Medusa's Tor leak site before your team has even finished their first cup of coffee. The affiliates are automating the internal discovery and exfiltration phases using these heavily customized scripts that run the absolute second they authenticate.
So if extortionists are moving that fast using purchased access, what happens when a sophisticated state actor doesn't even bother buying access? What if they just drop a 0-day directly onto an employee's machine?
Well, that brings us to the August Patch Tuesday from Microsoft.
Oh boy. Nearly 400 vulnerabilities fixed this month, 398 to be exact.
Yeah, and 42 of those were rated critical. That is a massive administrative burden for any IT department.
Huge.
But we really need to isolate CVE 2026-68820. This is a 0-day in the Windows Ancillary Function Driver for WinSock.
That's the AFD.sys driver, right?
Correct. And this wasn't just a theoretical bug found by a researcher in a lab. This was actively exploited in the wild by the Lazarus Group.
The North Korean state-sponsored threat actor.
The very same. Lazarus was using this 0-day as part of an ongoing, highly targeted campaign called Operation Dream Job.
Dream Job, right?
Yeah. They're going after aerospace and defense companies across France, Germany, Brazil, and India. And the mechanism is almost elegantly simple on the front end. They approach an employee on social media or email with this highly compelling, lucrative job offer from a supposed Western defense giant.
And the moment that target opens the fake job description, like the recruitment PDF, the exploit triggers.
Exactly.
But wait, mechanically, how does a malicious document bypass modern Windows protections to get deep system access? Like, I'm looking at this AFD.sys driver, handles network socket communications. How does a network driver translate to owning the entire machine?
Well, the vulnerability allowed for local privilege escalation. So when the user opens the payload, the exploit code intentionally feeds malformed data into that specific WinSock driver.
Okay.
And because the driver operates at the kernel level, which is the absolute core of the operating system, and it failed to properly validate the input, the attacker's code is executed with system privileges.
Wow.
Yeah. And from there, Lazarus deployed a new version of their FudModule rootkit.
Rootkits are terrifying. They basically lie to the operating system itself. Like if your antivirus asks the system, hey, are there any malicious processes running? The rootkit intersects that question and says, nope, everything is totally fine here.
Precisely. FudModule uses direct kernel object manipulation to completely blind your endpoint detection and response tools. It just turns off the telemetry that your security team relies on.
So you're flying blind.
Totally blind. And once the machine was blind, they dropped a custom backdoor called Troy.
Jeez.
Yeah. For defense contractors and high-tech manufacturing firms in Southeast Europe, the relevance here is immediate. You run the exact same Windows architecture. Your engineers are prime targets for these exact same social engineering lures.
So you have this highly sophisticated kernel-level exploit, but it's wrapped in a basic human resources scam.
Yes, exactly.
But you're talking about dropping malware on a specific endpoint. What if the attacker doesn't want just one endpoint? What if they want the keys to the entire directory?
Oh, you're talking about Entra ID.
Yeah, let's look at another critical vulnerability from that same Patch Tuesday. This is CVE 2026-69836 in Microsoft Entra ID.
Formerly Azure Active Directory, for those keeping track of the name changes.
Right. This is basically the identity layer for almost everything in the corporate world now. Microsoft 365, Azure infrastructure, thousands of third-party apps.
It's the central nervous system. And this flaw allowed for unauthenticated remote code execution based on the deserialization of untrusted data.
Okay, let me see if I have this serialization concept right, because it's such a critical weakness and it comes up a lot. I always hear it described as like packing flat box furniture.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right, so you serialize data to ship it across the internet efficiently, and when it reaches the Entra ID backend, the server deserializes it, it unpacks the box, and rebuilds the data objects in memory.
That's the standard way to visualize it. The data has to be flattened to travel and reconstructed to be used.
Right, but that doesn't really explain the exploit itself. When the server unpacks that flat box, it's not just passively pulling out a chair. It's blindly following the assembly instructions included inside the box.
Yes.
So the attacker doesn't send a chair. They send a box containing instructions that say, build a backdoor and hand me the administrative authentication tokens. And because the server doesn't validate those instructions before executing them, it just obediently builds the backdoor.
That is exactly the mechanism of CWE-502, which is the specific weakness here. Entra ID was processing these specially crafted, serialized objects without verifying their integrity first. So an attacker could send a malicious package to the endpoint, and the identity layer would execute arbitrary code just to reconstruct it.
And the most dangerous part of all this?
It required zero authentication.
Zero. You didn't even need a phished password. You just send the bad instructions, and you control the identity layer. Now, the good news is that Microsoft actually mitigated this on the back end. Because Entra ID is a cloud service, there's no patch for your IT team to download and install.
But that creates this this false sense of security.
Right.
Because Microsoft confirmed this vulnerability was exploited in the wild before they patched it. So if you are managing a network in Southeast Europe, your work isn't done just because Microsoft fixed their cloud.
You can't just brush your hands and walk away.
Exactly. You still have to operate under the assumption that someone might have used this flaw to bypass your authentication policies a month ago.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to review your Untried sign-in logs, audit your privileged role assignments, and look for any conditional access policies that were altered recently.
So that is a macro-level cloud disaster. But let's pull the lens all the way back down to the micro level, specifically the device in your pocket. Yeah. On August 13th, Apple sent out a massive wave of threat notifications to users spanning 110 countries, warning them that they were likely targets of mercenary spyware.
We are talking about zero-click surveillance tools here, similar to NSO Group's Pegasus.
Scary stuff.
Very. These aren't your typical mass phishing campaigns. They are hyper-targeted, multi-million-dollar exploits usually deployed against journalists, political dissidents, and government officials. And since 2021, Apple has actually had to send these notifications to users in over 150 countries.
What really fascinates me is the complete accountability void here.
Oh, it's a massive problem.
These spyware companies operate in broad daylight, building weapons that compromise our core communication devices, yet stopping them feels legally impossible. The Atlantic Council just put out a report titled 404 Accountability Not Found, and it highlights how these vendors use basically corporate shell games to dodge lawsuits.
Yeah.
Like, there's a vendor in there called Kendiru that changed its name 4 times. I think it's now Cytotech Ltd., literally just to evade legal consequences.
Market obscurity is a massive hurdle for victims. But the bigger issue is jurisdiction hopping.
How so?
These surveillance vendors establish their corporate entities in countries with highly permissible legal environments, or in places that actively shield them for national security reasons. So if a targeted journalist in Europe tries to sue the developer of the spyware that ruined their life, they are fighting a ghost in a courtroom thousands of miles away that has zero interest in holding the vendor accountable.
Wow. So because victims can't realistically sue the spyware makers, the Atlantic Council report proposes this completely different solution. They suggest creating a legal safe harbor for the technology platforms themselves, like Apple and Google.
Which is controversial.
I have to push back on this. If we want Apple to write more secure codes so zero-click spyware stops working in the first place, how does granting a trillion-dollar tech giant immunity from liability actually help a targeted activist? It sounds entirely backwards to me.
It does sound counterintuitive at first glance, I agree, but you really have to look at the perverse incentives currently at play. Think about it. If a major tech company publicly admits that their operating system had a fundamental flaw that allowed a human rights worker to be infected with spyware, they instantly open themselves up to massive product liability lawsuits from those victims.
Oh. So the financially smart thing for the tech company to do is just quietly patch the bug and pretend they don't know who got hacked.
Exactly.
Wow.
The fear of litigation incentivizes silence. A safe harbor framework would legally shield compliant technology firms from being sued over the software vulnerability itself. But, and this is key, only if they meet incredibly strict standards.
Like what?
They would be legally required to run comprehensive threat notification programs, like the alerts Apple just sent. They would have to proactively hunt for the spyware, responsibly share that intelligence with independent researchers, and rapidly deploy mitigations.
Okay, I see the logic now. It's an acknowledgement that perfect security against a well-funded nation-state is practically impossible.
Right.
So instead of punishing the platform for getting breached, you give them a legal shield in exchange for weaponizing their vast resources to actively hunt the attackers and warn the victims.
It forces the platform to become an active defender alongside the user, rather than a passive bystander worried about their own legal exposure.
That makes a lot of sense. But if we're struggling to hold commercial entities accountable because of legal loopholes, how on earth do we handle the sheer chaos of the open source world, where anyone with a keyboard can expose a critical vulnerability to the entire internet in a single post?
You're talking about GeoServer.
Look at what happened on August 12th with GeoServer.
Yeah, that was wild. GeoServer is a widely used open source server for sharing and editing geospatial data. It's embedded in countless critical systems globally. A security researcher discovered a critical SQL injection 0-day in the platform and just publicly disclosed it on X, formerly Twitter, at 10:46 UTC.
And the internet immediately caught fire. Within hours of that tweet, threat intelligence platforms observed hundreds of distinct exploitation attempts probing for vulnerable GeoServer instances worldwide.
Hundreds of them, yeah. And the mechanism of this SQL injection is particularly brutal. It exists in how GeoServer handles spatial queries using the PostgreSQL database. Specifically, an attacker-controlled value is interpolated directly into a PostgreSQL JSON B.PATH.sys expression.
Wait, without escaping the input?
Exactly, without any input sanitization.
Let me use another analogy here because I love analogies.
Go for it.
It's like giving someone a visitor name tag that says, John, drop table users.
Yeah.
The security desk, or in this case, the database engine, doesn't read it as just a name. It reads that semicolon as the end of a sentence and interprets the rest of the name tag as a direct command to execute.
That's a perfect visualization. The application blindly trusts the input. So if the attacker leverages a specific web feature service, they can force that second PostgreSQL statement to execute at the highest level of the query. Yeah. If the database connection is running with superuser privileges, that SQL injection instantly escalates to full remote code execution on the host server. And even without superuser rights, they can still exfiltrate the entire underlying geospatial database.
Now, patches have since been released. If you are running GeoServer, you need to update to versions 3.0.1, 2.28.5, or 2.27.6 right now.
Immediately.
But I keep coming back to that timeline. A researcher tweets a flaw, and before the vendor can even draft a patch, automated scanners are weaponizing it. It really feels like the whole concept of responsible disclosure is collapsing under the weight of automation.
We're definitely seeing the friction between transparency and security. When proof of concept code or explicit vulnerability details are published publicly before defenders have a patch, it completely inverts the advantage.
Right.
The attackers have automated infrastructure ready to scan the entire IPv4 space in minutes. Defenders have change management boards and testing requirements. The math simply doesn't favor the defense.
No, it doesn't. Scanning for open ports is one thing. But if speed is the ultimate weapon right now, the smartest attackers won't even race you to the patch.
No, they won't.
They will just poison the patch itself before it reaches your server. Which brings us to arguably the most insidious campaign we've seen this week, the Lazarus and Trivi supply chain attack.
Attributed to a threat group known as Team PCP, this campaign compromised over 2,500 organizations, exposed 434,000 CI/CD pipelines, and resulted in 153 gigabytes of stolen data.
The blast radius is just staggering, but the way they did it is what you really need to pay attention to, because this is an Inception-level hack.
It really is.
It's a compromised token, 3 tools deep. They poisoned a security scanner to infect an automated pipeline to backdoor in an AI development gateway.
Let's trace the mechanics of how this cascaded, because it's important.
Yeah.
It started with Trivi, which is a highly popular open-source vulnerability scanner. Developers use it to check their code for flaws before deploying it. Team PCP somehow managed to compromise a specific build of Trivi.
The ultimate irony, right? Poisoning the tool designed to find the poison.
Exactly. And from there, the attack pivoted to LightLM. Now, LightLM is a widely used AI gateway that development teams use to manage their API calls to various large language models like OpenAI or Anthropic.
Sure.
The developers maintaining LightLM had their automated continuous integration pipeline configured to install Trivi to scan their code. But crucially, they were using an unpinned version of the dependency.
Meaning their build script didn't say download Trivi version 1.2.3 because we know it is safe. The script just said download the latest version of Trivi. So when the pipeline ran, it automatically pulled down the compromised scanner.
Exactly. It just pulled it blindly. And once that malicious Trivi scanner was inside the LittleM build environment, it backdoored the LittleM software itself. The automated pipeline then dutifully published the newly poisoned versions of LightLM, specifically versions 1.82.7 and 1.82.8, directly to the Python package index.
So developers all over the world, including enterprises in Southeast Europe who are aggressively integrating AI into their workflows, they run their standard updates.
Right.
They download what they firmly believe is a legitimate update to their AI gateway, but they are pulling a compromised package. And the payload here wasn't ransomware. It was pure espionage.
The malicious script was designed to run quietly at startup and comprehensively sweep the environment for secrets. It harvested SSH keys, AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure credentials, Kubernetes service account tokens, and CI/CD secrets. And because they specifically targeted an AI development tool, they also scraped the LLM API keys and gateway configurations.
They stole the keys to the entire artificial intelligence kingdom.
They really did.
If you use those specific Lytel LM versions, you have to assume your cloud infrastructure credentials are currently sitting on a server controlled by Team PCP. You can't just uninstall the bad package. You have to rotate every single credential that was exposed to that environment. It proves that trusting a single unpinned dependency can basically burn your entire cloud architecture to the ground.
It is a harsh lesson in zero trust architecture. You cannot implicitly trust a security tool just because of its name, and you certainly cannot trust unpinned dependencies in automated build environments.
It is a heavy briefing today, I know, but this is the reality of the threat landscape. And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you review your own security posture this week. We started this deep dive talking about the stopwatch.
The speed of it all.
Right. With threat actors automating zero-day exploits in a matter of hours based on a social media post, and nation-states actively poisoning the automated pipelines we trust to build our software, the old IT adage of patch quickly is fundamentally broken.
It's obsolete.
If the window to patch a vulnerability is now shorter than the time it takes your team to even read the security advisory, you must stop asking, how do we keep them out? And start asking, how do we operate our network securely, knowing they are already inside?
It requires a complete shift in philosophy. You have to move away from building a taller perimeter fence and focus entirely on internal resilience, segmentation, and rapid consequence mitigation.
It's the only way forward. Thank you for joining us for this intelligence briefing. Take these lessons, check your logs, and audit your dependencies. Until next time, decode the threat and defend the region.